Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome to a $600 gaming PC build. Let's get right into this video with the CPU of the build. For the CPU, I went with the AMD FX 6300 Vishera 3.5 GHz, 4.1 GHz turbo socket AM3 Plus 95 watt 6-core desktop processor. Now, this CPU retails for about $110 to $120 right now, depending on the retailer you shop at. I've seen various sales of this CPU go as low as $90, but none of that price is available as of the recording of this video. You can find one for $110 on Newegg.com right now after a promotional code. Now, the FX 6300 is a very solid CPU for the budget end gamer that also likes to do things like video editing, live streaming, and obviously gaming, since this is a gaming PC. 6 cores is more than what most games take advantage of. Nowadays, most games take advantage of 4 cores, but with the debut of the PS4 and the Xbox One, a lot more games are taking advantage of multi-core technology, that being more than 4 cores, since the PS4 and the Xbox One do both run an 8-core CPU, obviously not to the level of, say, an FX 8350, but 8-core CPUs nonetheless. So you're seeing in games like Battlefield 4 and a couple other games that are coming out later this year, like Watch Dogs and Titanfall that came out a couple weeks ago, that 6-core technology is starting to be taken advantage of in PC gaming. So a 6-core CPU is not a bad option to go with, opposed to the competing CPU at this price range, the i3, which is a dual-core CPU with hyper-threading. Hyper-threading just does not work as efficient as having the physical cores, so I believe the FX 6300 is a much better option as far as the CPU goes. For $110, it also retails for about $30 cheaper than the i3, so it just makes a whole lot more sense going with this CPU opposed to the i3 route. Moving on to the motherboard, I went with the Asus M5A97LE-R2O. Now, this is an AM3 Plus motherboard, meaning it'll work with all your FX, Phenom 2, Athlon 2, and Sempron series CPU. Obviously, in this build, like I said before, we are running an FX 6300, so that's going to work with this motherboard just fine. Now, this is a really solid motherboard, retailing for about $73 after a mail-in rebate. It comes packed with SATA 6 GB per second, USB 3, and UEFI BIOS, and generally, you're buying a motherboard from Asus, you can generally expect a pretty solid, rock-solid product from them. They have a really good warranty policy, and generally, you get a damn good product. It has great reviews, and it comes fairly cheap at $73 after a mail-in rebate. It's going to leave you a lot of extra cash for the more important parts, so to say, like the graphics card and some other stuff, because, you know, the motherboard is important of a PC build, but this is mainly a gaming PC, and you want to save as much money as you can so you can devote that to the graphics card, but it is important to get a solid motherboard, and I think the Asus M5A97 fills that bill, so this is going to be a good motherboard for the build. Moving on to the RAM, I went with G.Skill Ripjaws X Series 8GB, 2 4GB sticks running at 1866 memory. This is a tight squeeze in a $600 build, as odd as that sounds, because you guys might have heard that the PS4 and Xbox One are actually running 8GB of RAM, and those are $400, $500 consoles. Well, the thing about 8GB of RAM nowadays is it's very expensive. To get a decent kit of 8GB of RAM, you're spending upwards of $80, $90, sometimes even $100 if you want the faster time to RAM. This kit specifically costs about $85, a solid fit in the build. I was able to fit it in the $600 budget. I wish it was a little bit cheaper like it was 2 years ago. You could get this same kit of RAM. I got it about a year and a half ago for about $45. You know, it's just something that's been sporadically increasing over the last couple of years, RAM prices that is, and now it's all the way up to $85, so that's unfortunate, but hey, you gotta pay to play, so to speak. And this 8GB of RAM is going to last you for a long time, because in my personal opinion, I don't see 12GB or even 16GB of RAM becoming the standard, like how 8GB of RAM is the standard right now. I don't see 12 or 16 overtaking 8 for a long time, probably 3 to 4 years, so an 8GB kit of RAM is going to do you just fine. Also, the motherboard does have 4 RAM slots, so you do have an expansion capabilities. If you do want to go to 16GB of RAM in the future, that option is open, but you're not going to take that just yet because it just doesn't seem sufficient with today's technology. Moving on to the graphics card, I went with the EVGA GeForce GTX 750 Ti Superclocked card. Now, this is a pretty solid graphics card for about $160. You actually get a free coupon worth of $150 in free-to-play games. Whatever that means, it's a couple games that I really don't care about, like Warface, Path of Exile, and Heroes of Newerth. But if you are into those games, that might be a cool, neat feature or a cool bonus that Newegg is giving out to you guys. But that just doesn't interest me at all. Those games, I've never played any of them, and I don't plan on playing them. I'm just not big into free-to-plays outside of League of Legends. That's besides the point. The $160 GeForce GTX 750 Ti is a pretty solid card for mid to high-end gaming. Now, you're not going to max out every title at 1080p with full anti-aliasing and things of that nature, but at 1080p, you're going to be able to run games at solid settings and solid frame rates. You're going to be able to fiddle around with some of the settings, because you're not going to be able to run everything at 1080p maxed out, like I said, so you're going to have the option to lower the resolution or keep the resolution high and lower the settings, whatever you see fit, or lower the resolution and the settings to have a really smooth frame rate. But generally, you're going to be able to have a pretty good experience with this graphics card. It is $160, like I said. The 750 Ti runs the latest games at pretty good settings and pretty good frame rates. Games like Battlefield 4 and Titanfall, you'll be able to play at 1080p without fiddling around with the settings too much, and you'll be able to play at max settings pretty easily. A game like Battlefield 4, you might have to lower the anti-aliasing, but at 1080p, again, anti-aliasing is not a big of an issue, so that should be just fine for you guys. Moving on to the power supply, I went with the Corsair CX Series CX500. It's 500 watt, 80 plus bronze certified power supply for $60. This also has a rebate available, taking it down to $39.99, $40. So that's a pretty solid deal for a 500 watt power supply. This is going to power the build no problem. And since a $600, if you do have a $600 budget, chances are you're not going to be going for an SLI configuration in the future because, you know, you're more of a budget-minded gamer. And I just tend to think SLIing a graphics card is kind of a waste, but I'm not going to go into that tangent again because I have several times in the past. So a CX500 is going to be just fine for you guys. It's going to power this build no problem. The 6300 is only 95 watts. That's the FX 6300. And the EVGA GTX 750 Ti is very power efficient as well. So this CX500 should power this build no problem. Moving on to the hard drive, I went with the Western Digital WD Blue 1TB. It's 1TB of storage. If you guys do have the extra, $50 to $60, I highly recommend picking up a 2TB or 3TB drive. 3TB drives can be bought for about $130 right now. It's something a lot of you guys should look into if you're the kind of guy that buys a lot of games on Steam sales and you are the kind of gamer that picks up the latest releases on day one. The thing about the latest next-gen titles is a game like Titanfall, after all the DLC, it's going to range somewhere between 60 to 70 gigabytes. Yeah, that one game alone. Elder Scrolls Online, I believe, is like 40 gigabytes. So these games are very expansive, and more of these games are going to range from 40 to 60 gigabytes. So it's not a bad idea to get a 2 or 3 terabyte drive. With that being said, 1TB is still plenty of space. You're going to be able to store a lot of the latest titles. It's just that if you do like to store, 20 to 30 of the latest games, and if you're not the kind of guy that likes to delete your games and pick and choose what games you like to have installed, it's not a bad idea to get a 2 or 3 terabyte drive. That's just my personal opinion, and a word of caution for those of you that are looking to buy a hard drive. But like I said, a 1TB drive is still plenty of space. It's gonna, you're gonna be able to download a lot of games onto it, and it shouldn't be a problem for those of you that, aren't buying every single game and are okay with deleting a couple of the games. Obviously, you can re-download them, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Finally, for the case of the build, I went with the Cooler Master Half 912. Solid mid-tower case from Cooler Master. I actually have this case myself, and I think it generally works pretty well. A lot of airflow, a lot of ventilation, and a lot of good features. And for $60, I felt that this was the route to go. It's fairly cheap. If you guys want some other options, check out the Rosewell Challenger. The Rosewell Blackhawk is pretty good. If you want something cheaper, the NZXT Source 210 is only like $40, and it's actually a pretty damn good case. So check out those cases if you want a couple of different other options. So yeah, thanks for watching this video, guys. Remember to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and comment. And I will catch you guys later. Peace.